was a quiet morning when we decided to climb that mountain, which, on the surface, was just another entry on our list of adventures. I have a passion for climbing, but I never thought this would be the expedition that would mark my mind forever. The air was so cold that you could see your breath condensing like white clouds, dissipating quickly. The group was excited, laughing and sharing stories about previous excursions. But soon, that light atmosphere was replaced by an uncomfortable weight, as if something was about to shift. When the avalanche isolated us, the world transformed. Snow and ice surrounded us, creating an oppressive silence, only interrupted by the howling wind. Panic began to settle in. We tried to contact rescue services, but our phones had no signal. A deeper chill started to envelop me. This wasn't just the cold coming from the mountain. Something in the atmosphere had changed. It was then that my friend Lucas received a text message from an unknown number. He turned pale as he read, "Do you see the shadow in the snow? The real danger is closer than you think." The warning shocked us all. What started as mere curiosity quickly evolved into desperation. The messages kept coming. Each one was written in vague language, but the words cut like knives. "One of you will not leave alive. The darkness comes to claim what is hers." What was most disturbing was that with each new message, strange things began to happen around us. A scream echoed in the mountains. A distant laugh lingered among the pines. Lucas became obsessed with discovering who was behind those messages, and with each attempt to investigate, his health seemed to deteriorate. He became more agitated, as if some invisible force was pulling him into the darkness. As hours passed and the cold intensified, the group split between those supporting Lucas and those wanting to ignore the messages and wait for rescue. But we had no idea that, in the meantime, we were being watched. We began to see things moving around us, silhouettes in the snow, shadows that seemed to laugh at us, as if the mountain itself were aware of our despair. The tension grew, as did the fear of the unknown. One of the group members, Anna, fainted inexplicably. Panic seized us, and none of us knew what to do. At that moment, I decided to look at Lucas's phone. I could barely read what was on the screen. His eyes shone in a disturbing way, and deep down, I knew something was consuming him. Once again, a new message arrived. "Trust is a poison. You are not alone." I looked around and realized that everyone seemed more tense. I felt the presence of something malevolent, something that fed on our fear. As time passed and the wait for rescue became increasingly agonizing, our gazes turned more accusatory, each questioning who the danger mentioned could be. Their faces began to blur into the snow, becoming a haze of despair. We fought against hypothermia and disorientation, but paranoia settled in. As if the mountain were manifesting in an alternate reality, someone began to murmur, "We need to protect ourselves." The messages, more specific and threatening, became an unrelenting psychological game. One phrase echoed in my mind, repeating like a malignant mantra, "The real danger is inside you." The way each person began to behave, the rising tension, and the doubt that struck even the strongest friendships, it all felt like a macabre experiment. That night, we were haunted by the darkness. The cold became increasingly unbearable, and the voices that had once quieted turned into screams. Anna awoke in a panic, screaming that someone was pulling her into the snow. The group rallied, and we tried to find her, but the blizzard blinded us. Shadows danced around us, and the messages grew more urgent, begging for attention. "He has already taken her. You are next." The sequence of events intensified, creating a spiral of terror that seemed to have no end. With every lost glance, we felt the solitude intensifying. We were trapped not only on the mountain, but also in our own insecurities and fears. What had once been a unified group now resembled a colony of panicked insects, each desperate to find their own way out. I rushed over to Lucas's phone again, determined to uncover any clues that might pull us from this hellish situation. The glow of the screen illuminated his face, which was shrouded in shadows. The messages he had received grew even more disturbing. "Don't trust those beside you. One of you will bring destruction." A wave of despair washed over me, and I began to wonder if Lucas might really be manipulated by the mountain itself. That's when I realized Anna had completely vanished. Panic set in, and we didn't know whether we had lost her or if she had been taken in an almost supernatural sense. The fear that had once united us now seemed to pit each against the others. "Let's get out of here," someone shouted, while others murmured that we might need to split up to find her. The blizzard intensified, and visibility dropped to 0. We heard whispers, voices that seemed to blend with the wind, beckoning us to yield to despair. The feeling that something was watching us had never been so strong. My heart raced as the sense of an unknown danger began to weave around our sanity. We were about to split in 2 directions, and the atmosphere grew increasingly critical when a new message arrived. If you separate, it will be the end. A choice must be made. The tension became palpable, like a thread about to snap. What was happening? How did this person, or entity, know we were in conflict? It felt as if the mountain was alive, breathing at its own rhythm, absorbing all our fears and uncertainties. The air was charged with something unbearable, and a sense of hopelessness enveloped us. I wished I had never received those messages. With a sudden impulse, I began to feel that the only way to deal with what was happening was to confront Lucas and the messages. I gathered my courage and said, "We need to unite and face this as a group. What may be happening here is happening to all of us." Hesitation flickered in his eyes, but he nodded as if searching for a way back to sanity. With renewed determination, we began to form a plan. We decided we wouldn't let the mountain divide us. The messages might be a form of manipulation, but we knew the true struggle lay within us. That night, we gathered in a circle, the lantern illuminating our pale, weary faces. We refocused on the idea that we needed to confront our fears. Each of us would share a memory, something we considered a weakness. In doing so, we would exorcise the ghost that the mountain seemed to be feeding. Over time, we noticed that the messages began to change as well. Unity is key. The past never disappears. They were subtle, but now they carried a tone of hope. With each story we told, the atmosphere within us began to warm slightly, even though the shadows still danced around us. However, this newfound hope quickly shattered when suddenly, Lucas began to scream, accusing one of us of being the traitor behind the messages. Panic surged once more like a relentless wave. Frustration and fear became so intertwined that we no longer knew what was real or merely a projection of our own anxiety. What was happening? A shadow overtook Lucas, and he seemed to transform before our eyes. "You are not worthy of leaving. The true danger was never the mountain," he shouted, almost as if he were no longer in control of his body. The tension morphed into chaos. Then, the darkness grew deeper. A moment of absolute silence hung in the air, as if the mountain was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The messages ceased abruptly, and just when we thought we were free from this torment, something horrific happened. Anna returned. I felt her presence before I saw her, like a cold that sliced through the soul. She came in silence, her body covered in snow, but her eyes glowed with an unbearable light, an otherworldly gleam that felt inhuman. My stomach churned. Unlike us, who were in a state of despair and fear, Anna seemed calm, almost ethereal, as if she were in a trance. She looked at us and spoke in a gentle tone that didn't quite seem to belong to her. "I found the way. The true danger has been unleashed." Those of us who were restless now became completely still. Their faces, once drained of color, now reflected a deep uncertainty. Lucas, still engulfed in his rage, shouted at Anna, demanding explanations. She raised a hand, and it was as if the silence intensified. "You don't understand. The mountain is not just a place. It is a guardian of secrets. What you have lost is much greater than you think." With each word, tension rose again, and the shadows around us seemed to stir, almost dancing to the rhythm of our panic. Anna now approached Lucas, as if drawn to him like a magnet, and something told me she knew far more than she was revealing. Overwhelmed by an impulse, I shouted without thinking, "We need to leave. Forget the messages. Let's focus on saving ourselves." But at that moment, I realized there were no longer any signs that rescue was on the way. The real danger was already among us. As this sudden epiphany struck me, I saw the expressions on each of their faces shift from confusion to terror. They seemed torn between trusting our group and what Anna represented. The air felt severely heavy, and a strange smell, like something burning, began to infiltrate our nostrils. Anna was now so close to Lucas that I could see the veins pulsing in his neck. No one moved. We were rooted in our fear, except when the glow from Lucas's phone flickered, revealing a countenance that sent chills down my spine. "You're wasting time," her voice echoed through the night. "He is already gone, and you all know he won't return." What did that mean? Chaos reigned within my mind as I struggled to understand what was about to happen. I looked at the others and realized that we were in a state of limbo. The mountain was not just a simple barrier of snow. It was an abyss pulling us towards something we couldn't comprehend. The tension in the air broke when Anna began speaking about something no one should have touched. What we did by conquering this mountain, every step, every laugh, it was all a sacrifice. And now, we are short of the repayment. This sounded like a call, a connection we didn't know we were awaiting. Before anyone could respond, an intense light formed behind Anna, and we all recoiled, as if we were bracing for a demon that had just made its appearance. The light began to pulse, revealing more than it could absorb. I looked at the faces of my friends, now caught between fear and the cruel rule of doubt. "If we don't go, no one will leave," I shouted, trying to rally any remaining hope. But as I looked at Lucas, his gaze was fixed on Anna, as if waiting for a command, an invitation to step into that light. The atmosphere felt suffocating, and a message that once had been a nightmare morphed into a type of reality we all shared in some way. What had started as a simple climb was now a game of survival. Then, a tremendous pressure bore down on us, as if the mountain itself was trying to crush us. Anna turned to us, her eyes now opaque and empty. "Decide now. What do you desire? If it is your lives, only one of you remains." Uncertainty washed over us. We began to argue frantically, but our voices turned into screams, and the screams quickly fell silent. In the height of that silence, with a snap, everything went dark. Suddenly, I realized that I was finally alone. The mountain had separated us, and what remained of our bonds had faded away. My heart raced so fast that I could barely breathe. The snowstorm had calmed, but the deep echo of our voices had turned into a distant whisper, as if the mountain were absorbing our fears and transforming them into nothingness. I stood in the same snow, but everything felt different, as if the world around me existed in another dimension. It took me a moment to collect myself, and I tried to shout for the group, but no sound came out. A profound despair began to consume me, and the only thing I could feel was an even more biting cold, as if the essence of fear itself was submerged in the air. I walked toward the sound of my own thoughts, losing track of time. Darkness surrounded every movement I made, but something propelled me forward, a calling that reverberated in the walls of my mind. Eventually, I found a clearing where the moonlight cast down upon the snow. It was at that moment that I realized what was truly happening. The mountain had not just separated us. It was testing each of us in an inconceivable way. There was a cycle within that place, a force manipulating human emotions, transforming our fight for survival into a true labyrinth of horror. In the middle of the clearing, I saw marks in the snow, patterns that seemed to be written by invisible hands. A feeling of déjà vu washed over me as I looked at those marks. It was as if, somehow, I knew I had been here before. The mountain demands what is hers, a voice within whispered, echoing what Anna had said earlier. I was being summoned. The temptation to become part of something larger and darker consumed my mind. My friends, who had once been pillars of hope, now became mere shadows of haunted memories. Deep down, I knew I had to choose. I could surrender to this force, yield to what was predestined, or find a way to escape. The fear and pain were palpable, not just in me, but in the echoes of everything that had happened. In a last desperate push, I looked up at the sky, no longer certain of what was real. "You can't take me," I shouted, and my voice seemed to blend with the wind, as if the mountain itself protested my resistance. In response, a wave of energy surged around me. The snowstorm began to intensify again. The figures that had retreated became visible in the dim light. Lucas, Anna, and the others returned, but something was wrong. Their gazes were empty, as if life itself had been drained from them. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable terror, and all I could do was recoil. "What happened to you?" I asked in desperation, but their mouths moved silently, and the horrid reality dissolved into flames of darkness. I found the courage to run in the opposite direction, where the darkness promised freedom. The mountain roared, and the pressure of the environment felt like it was squeezing me. Every step I took seemed to pull me back into the darkness, into what I was trying to avoid. My legs felt heavy, as if the snow itself were trying to hold me back. But the memory of laughter and companionship, though distant, gave me the strength to keep going. I knew this was not just a battle against the mountain. It was a fight for my sanity and to reclaim what I had lost. I will not let this destroy me, I thought as I pushed on relentlessly, each step taking me closer to the exit. As I finally crossed an open field, a new sensation overwhelmed me. The feeling that the mountain had given up. On the horizon, I spotted a light, not the light of rescue, but a comforting glow pulsating with promises of life. It was as if those who had disappeared had become mere memories, and any shadows trying to follow me were finally expelled by the light. I did not look back, but a part of me knew that the true danger, what had separated us, was not simply the mountain. It was the very fear we cultivated in one another. Breathing irregularly, I finally reached the location where rescue awaited me. The voices around me felt ethereal, and though I was safe, I carried with me the certainty that I might never be the same. As I boarded the helicopter and felt the warmth of what it meant to be alive, I wondered if I would ever know the truth about what happened on that mountain. The sound of the rotors spinning was deafening, but I could feel the pressure in my temples dissipate. However, even as I pulled away from the horror, the doubt lingered. What would happen to Anna, Lucas, and the others? Their fates haunted me, no matter how far I was. What would become of that enthusiastic group of climbers? Where were the echoes of our laughter that now seemed to envelop them in a shroud of silence? Upon landing at the base, the feeling of relief was quickly replaced by unease. Before entering the medical attention tent, I paused and looked back at the mountain, which now stood majestically against the blue, illuminated sky. That structure that had promised adventure had turned into a nightmare. It felt alive, bearing witness to every step I took, every breath I had lost. A chill ran down my spine. I couldn't simply forget. I couldn't just move on as if nothing had happened. What had been a simple outing had become an existential experience. And how could I treat it as a distant memory? As I was examined, information about the searches conducted on the mountain began to emerge. I learned that the other members of my group were never found. They died with their stories and secrets, lost in that frozen expanse. The pain became visceral as I realized they might have been screaming for help while I turned my back on them. The mountain had claimed its tribute. A mixture of guilt and horror overwhelmed me, as if the same fate might have awaited me. I was alive, but not free from the impact of what had occurred. Returning home, the mountain continued to echo in my mind like a ghost, and every time I closed my eyes, I could see the faces of my friends, frightened, lost. The messages that Lucas had received became a constant in my daily life, a hidden warning reflecting in every shadow that crossed my path. One of you will not leave alive. Now, that realization evolved into a persistent shadow haunting my nights. Somehow, the words solidified into large, glowing letters, echoing what I could not erase. Time passed, but the sense of loss and the uncertainty of what really happened on the mountain became indelible parts of me. The monotony of everyday life, the mundane interactions, all felt unreal compared to that night. What could not be explained became a part of my being. The true danger was neither the mountain nor the messages. It was perhaps what we as human beings are capable of becoming when lost in our fears and distrust. A few months later, I decided to write all of this down, hoping to bring closure to an insecure cycle that seemed never-ending. The mountains still weighed on me, even as I wished for that weight to dissipate. I considered sharing it in a forum where others might read, reflect, and perhaps understand. I never knew if, in that moment of writing, I would find some type of relief or at least some understanding. Finally, I selected my words, hopeful that this could help someone. After pressing publish, an oppressive sensation washed over me. My hands trembled, and one final thought crossed my mind. What if, in its essence, the mountain's mission had never simply been to seek souls? What if the messages that warned us of our true danger were, in fact, a cry from the mountain itself? I realized that the cycle was far from over and that it was only a matter of time before anyone listening in the darkness would once more begin to whisper. It was a cold, clear day when I decided to explore a national park, the kind of place that transforms into a snow-covered paradise in winter. I had always loved the tranquility of nature, and that day the landscape was even more breathtaking. The snow shone under the sunlight like a magical cloak, turning every tree and trunk into white sculptures. I stepped off the beaten path and followed a less-known trail that wound deeper into the forest, captivated by the fresh footprints in the snow. I was feeling bold, as if I were on the verge of discovering a forgotten secret. As I delved deeper, something began to change. Clouds started to gather in the sky, and the light was no longer as welcoming. The atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder and heavier, as if the forest itself was closing in around me. My steps became hesitant as the footprints in the snow became more pronounced. It was then that I noticed I was not the only one leaving marks on the pristine surface. There were other footprints, smaller and deeper, seemingly leading to an unexplored place. A disconcerting sensation of not being alone began to envelop me. As the clouds thickened, I started to hear whispers in the trees. The snow crunching underfoot and the muffled screams carried by the wind made my heart race. A primal fear began to settle in, like a cold serpent coiling in my stomach. I knew it was not just the solitude of the forest that left me uneasy. It was the feeling that something or someone was watching me. I tried to convince myself it was merely the winds coming alive, but the truth was that fear had a face, and I could feel that face looming in the shadows. My mind raced to the stories I had read about people getting lost in forests, the legends that spoke of creatures that fed on loneliness and fear. I paused, lifting my head and glancing around, trying to see any sign that might explain my unease. The tall, skeletal trees seemed to lean over me, and I felt an urge to pull away from that horrific scene. The path I had followed appeared to grow darker, as if I were sinking into a nightmare that would not end. The depth of the footprints ahead suggested a presence that was no longer invisible. I tried to turn back, but with each step I took, the footprints seemed to intensify, as if they were following me back. The wind began to howl, carrying distant echoes that seemed closer than they were. I didn't know if they were echoes of human voices or simply the wind chilling my sanity. What truly began to terrify me was the realization that the lighter footprints seemed to be drawn in response to my own presence. Accompanied by a sense of despair, I quickened my pace, but the feeling of being followed only grew stronger. Before long, I found myself breathless, my heart racing so quickly that I could barely process what was happening. The path I thought I knew had now turned into a trap, and the only thought I could cling to was, why did I think this was a good idea? The trees had become walls, and the snow a mirror reflecting not only what was around me, but also what was hidden within me. I continued to run, but the voices grew more distinct, a tangle of whispers and laughter swirling around me, as if the very trees were laughing at my distress. It was then that I realized the footprints were now behind me, as if the very enactment of what was happening was fading with each hurried step. Yet the terror was still there, pulsing in my veins and oppressing me with a feeling of loss. I had entered a cycle of fear that seemed never-ending, and the only choice I had was to keep fighting to escape that grip. But just as the path truly inclined, I plunged back onto the main road, the sunlight pouring down on me as if it were the last assurance I would ever have. As I looked back, I noticed the footprints had vanished, as if they had never existed. The whispers of the trees dissipated, but the feeling of being watched persisted. The safety of the sunlight, although comforting, could not dispel the cold that had now taken root inside me. I paused for a moment, my body trembling with adrenaline, struggling to regulate my breathing. It was as if the mountain were telling me that this experience was not over, that a part of me remained trapped in the darkness I had left behind. I tried to seek answers in the faces of passing tourists, but they all seemed oblivious, their laughter and casual conversations ringing like distant echoes. As I walked back to the parking lot, the light snowfall that had once seemed magical began to feel oppressive. The path was covered in a blanket of white, and I anxiously scanned the area, as if expecting to see those footprints re-emerging in the snow or to hear those whispers echoing among the trees. I could barely tear my eyes away from the path, and every crunch of the snow beneath my feet reminded me that I should have been on high alert, that nature had failed to protect me. It was clear that a part of me did not want to forget what I had experienced, the terrible knowledge that true terror might be lurking anywhere. When I finally reached the car, I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the disturbing feelings. As I started the engine, I looked back one last time. The trees appeared normal, but there was an undeniable feeling that the forest had not finished telling its stories. What had been merely a walk had become chapters of a horror tale I could not dismiss. Whatever had followed me on that trail was invisibly intertwined with my memory, like a shadow I could not shake. Later, when I returned home, the normalcy of life began to reclaim its place, but the sense of strangeness did not diminish. I recounted my experience to friends and family, but their reactions were always met with skepticism or mild amusement. They laughed and said I had watched too many horror movies. But the truth was that I knew there was something more, something terrifying that would not easily fade away. What I had witnessed was not simply an illusion. There was an unspoken rule in nature, and I was now a spectator of its reality. The following weeks were exhausting. Troubling dreams haunted me, and the marks of those footprints in the snow continued to generate echoes in my mind. Over time, I began to feel more at ease in the city, but the park never left my heart. The doubt loomed in the air. Could such a beautiful place hide depths of horror that only those who ventured and dared to see? The whispering wind, the vanished footprints, and the muffled screams became an inseparable part of who I was. A month after that event, I decided to return to the park, fully aware that I would not be the same person. The idea was to confront my fears and find some form of closure, or at least try to understand what had happened. As I stepped out of the car, the icy air enveloped me, and memories began to flood my mind. This time, I was prepared. I wouldn't let fear overwhelm me. I followed the same trail, remembering the footprints that had once guided me to terror and the unknown. As I approached the open ground where the most disturbing experiences occurred, I felt a shift. The wind blew stronger, and the clouds began to gather once again. The same spirit of anxiety settled in, but I refused to be intimidated. I walked on, focusing on the serenity of the environment. But as I turned the corner, I knew something was different. It wasn't the footprints, but a dense pressure around me that seemed to constrict my mind. Without warning, I heard the whispers again, but this time they were not the same as before. They were darker, a kind of warning that echoed through the snow and seeped into my being. With a deep surge of fear, I almost cried, but I refused to look back. Instead, I made a decision. I would not let that feeling of doubt and dread determine my fate. With my heart racing, I pushed forward, determined not to be overcome by fear. With every step, the whispers seemed to intensify, as if the trees surrounding me were conspiring. The sense that something dark was approaching deepened, and I knew I had to stand firm to face whatever was hiding in the darkness of the forest. The chill in the air felt sharper, and the daylight slowly faded, as if nature itself were trying to warn me to return to safety. Suddenly, it occurred to me that this could all be an illusion, that the symphony of whispers and echoes could simply be the wind playing among the trees. But belief in illusions did not protect me from the feeling that something was watching my every movement. I looked around, expecting to see a creature lurking in the shadows, but the sight that met my eyes froze me in place. Just like the footprints, a new impression in the snow began to form before me, a mark that did not belong to me. My heart raced even faster when I realized these new footprints seemed to lead to a clearing, different from the one where I had faced my fears before. Something told me that the forest was not just challenging me, but drawing me towards something, a revelation or a condemnation. I hesitated for a moment, battling the impulse to run, but curiosity pulled me in. I moved closer to the clearing, each step echoing in the deafening silence. What I found there paralyzed my body. It was an old tree, almost like an altar, with profane markings etched into its bark. The snow around it looked more reddish, and my stomach churned as I realized they were not merely shadows. It was as if the very ground was bearing witness to something dark. The figure of a shadow flashed in my mind, the one I had encountered in my dreams. What was this place? What had happened here before I arrived? The whispers transformed into screams, rising to an anguished clamor that seemed to push my being forward. In that instant, I remember the stories people told about nature parks. Ancient legends of lost souls becoming part of the landscape, trapped in an eternal cycle of sorrow and regret. I looked around, and for the first time, I understood that there was something real in that fear. I was not just an observer. I was part of the conversation the forest had begun. Feeling the pressure building in my chest, I knew I could not retreat. Something profound was asking me to look within and confront the pain I had ignored. Suddenly, the tree swayed, and a soft light entered the night, enveloping the clearing. Fear told me to run, to scream, but some invisible force held me anchored to the ground. The voices, now clearly recognizable, murmured what I did not want to hear. Find the truth, and you will be free. My emotions swirled in a tempest. The footprints in the snow, the muffled screams, everything began to make sense. It was a call to face the unknown, a nudge towards something much deeper. I took a deep breath and advanced toward the old tree. I approached, feeling a powerful energy emanating from it, and touched its bark with fear and reverence. It was at that moment that I saw the message carved into it, a word that sent chills down my spine. Reveal. The sense of perdition began to dissipate, and a light surrounded me. The clearing came alive, and voices that had seemed to scream now sang a gentle melody. It was not just fear that surrounded me. It was also an understanding that this place, even with all its horror, sought to convey a message. With tears streaming down my face, I realized that what I had experienced was not merely a test, but a ritual of self-discovery. The connection between what I feared and what I sought rested in nature and in the eternal struggle between light and shadow. I felt that a part of me had been freed, a truth now clearly drawn before me. Even so, I knew that leaving the forest meant carrying this truth with me, a palpable responsibility. When I finally managed to step away from the tree, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The snow beneath my feet felt lighter, and the pressure surrounding me began to dissipate. The clearing, with its shadows and whispers, transformed into a space of release. As I slowly walked back along the path that had once felt oppressive, I could sense the transformation that had occurred within me. It was as if each step was pushing away not just the snow, but also the fears that had prevented me from living fully. The footprints I left behind were now marks of overcoming, not of despair. Upon reaching the main path, The sunlight broke through the clouds, casting bright rays over the magical scenery of the forest. The contrast between the brightness and the darkness I had faced made me realize that the experiences we go through, even the most terrifying ones, have the power to shape and strengthen us. The national park, once a symbol of fear, was now becoming a landmark of re-encountering myself. A sense of peace enveloped my spirit, as the wind seemed to whisper words of encouragement. As I walked toward the parking lot, I glanced back at the forest, now bursting with life and vibrant colors under the sun. That place, which had once been a labyrinth of despair and solitude, now revealed itself as a space where I could confront and accept my vulnerabilities. The memory of the whispers and the footprints would become a part of me, a metaphor for life's challenges and the importance of facing our fears. The car came into view just a few meters away, but before entering, I bowed my head and offered a small gesture of gratitude to the park. It had taught me that it is in the darkness that we find our greatest truths, and that every shadow has the potential to transform into light. As I got into the vehicle, an instinct compelled me to check my phone. There was an unread message. My heart raced, but upon opening it, I realized it was merely a trivial notification from a friend. The relief was intense, and that little interaction made me smile. I drove out of the park with the car window open, allowing the fresh air to pour in and envelop me. It was almost as if the mountain was bidding me farewell. "Thank you," I thought, relieved. I knew that my journey hadn't ended there. What wasn't clear was that the echoes of that experience would accompany me, but now they were allies, not enemies. I might not be the same, but the ability to continue living with a new understanding made me feel stronger. In the days that followed, the memories of the forest intertwined with the routine of daily life, but always with a newfound depth. I began to engage more with nature, exploring trails I had never considered before. Every adventure now became an opportunity to rediscover the lessons the park had provided me. The footprints in the snow, which once evoked terror, transformed into a symbol of transformation and resilience, something I wouldn't soon forget. The experience manifested into a new personal project, a collection of stories about personal triumphs. I shared my own narrative on a nature and adventure blog, and this connection with others who had battled their own fears became a source of motivation. In every word I wrote, I realized I was helping not only others but also myself, healing the wounds that the forest had exposed. Then, one day, while revisiting that special park, I realized my journey was far from about what I had left behind. It was about what I'd found along the way and how it empowered me to live more fully. The park was not merely a place. It was a portal to a deeper understanding of myself. There, among the trees, I discovered the power of vulnerability and the beauty of courage. Thus, as I distanced myself once again from that forest that had challenged me, I felt a sense of gratitude. As the sun set on the horizon, with the shadows of the forest stretching long, I carried with me not just memories, but the certainty that shadows and light exist side by side. The cold of winter had become a metaphor for the challenges we face in our lives. I believe that just as the snow melts and gives way to the bloom of spring, we too are capable of reinterpreting our darkest experiences into opportunities to grow and thrive. As I walked toward the parking lot, I glanced back at the forest, now bursting with life and vibrant colors under the sun. That place, which had once been a labyrinth of despair and solitude, now revealed itself as a space where I could confront and accept my vulnerabilities. The memory of the whispers and the footprints would become a part of me, a metaphor for life's challenges and the importance of facing our fears. The car came into view just a few meters away, but before entering, I bowed my head and offered a small gesture of gratitude to the park. It had taught me that it is in the darkness that we find our greatest truths, and that every shadow has the potential to transform into light. As I got into the vehicle, an instinct compelled me to check my phone. There was an unread message. My heart raced, but upon opening it, I realized it was merely a trivial notification from a friend. The relief was intense, and that little interaction made me smile. I drove out of the park with the car window open, allowing the fresh air to pour in and envelop me. It was almost as if the mountain was bidding me farewell. "Thank you," I thought, relieved. I knew that my journey hadn't ended there. What wasn't clear was that the echoes of that experience would accompany me, but now they were allies, not enemies. I might not be the same, but the ability to continue living with a new understanding made me feel stronger. In the days that followed, the memories of the forest intertwined with the routine of daily life, but always with a newfound depth. I began to engage more with nature, exploring trails I had never considered before. Every adventure now became an opportunity to rediscover the lessons the park had provided me. The footprints in the snow, which once evoked terror, transformed into a symbol of transformation and resilience, something I wouldn't soon forget. The experience manifested into a new personal project, a collection of stories about personal triumphs. I shared my own narrative on a nature and adventure blog, and this connection with others who had battled their own fears became a source of motivation. In every word I wrote, I realized I was helping not only others but also myself, healing the wounds that the forest had exposed. Then, one day, while revisiting that special park, I realized my journey was far from about what I had left behind. It was about what I'd found along the way and how it empowered me to live more fully. The park was not merely a place. It was a portal to a deeper understanding of myself. There, among the trees, I discovered the power of vulnerability and the beauty of courage. Thus, as I distanced myself once again from that forest that had challenged me, I felt a sense of gratitude. As the sun set on the horizon, with the shadows of the forest stretching long, I carried with me not just memories, but the certainty that shadows and light exist side by side. The cold of winter had become a metaphor for the challenges we face in our lives. I believe that just as the snow melts and gives way to the bloom of spring, we too are capable of reinterpreting our darkest experiences into opportunities to grow and thrive. Without hesitation, I rose and ran toward the door. The environment shifted rapidly around me, the figures now vanishing like vapor. As I crossed the threshold, the shelter's light surrounded me, and the whispers of the prayers became a distant echo, like a gentle memory that now occupied a safe place in my heart. I was welcomed back into the shelter, where the victims found comfort and safety, free from the figures that had surrounded me before. The need to help and be a bearer of light felt increasingly essential. Looking around, I saw the people who needed support, and a new determination surged through my veins. The experience I'd lived not only freed me, but also opened my eyes to how important it is to reach out in times of need. This connection with those who face their own horrors made me realize that volunteering was not just about providing shelter or food. It was about offering emotional support, understanding, and above all, compassion. As I set about helping others passing through that shelter, I carried not just food, but also the lessons I learned in that dark room and in the whispered prayers. As I walked through the shelter, I began to notice those who were struggling with their pain. There was an elderly man in the corner, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the ground as if the heavy memories of better days held him captive. As I approached him, the image of the figures whispering alongside those prayers formed in my mind once again. "Are you okay?" I asked, and our exchanges became small steps toward the hope and support he so desperately needed. As the night progressed, I realized the importance of bringing to the shelter the same light that had illuminated that strange room. The warmth of interactions with the victims transformed into a network of support. I began organizing people into small groups to share stories of resilience and overcoming. Nothing was more comforting than hearing and telling those experiences instead of sinking into silent pain. It became a collective release. The shelter came alive, and the once dim faces began to shine again. It was one of those moments etched in my memory, a clear sign that the shelter was more than just a physical space. It was a temporary home, a place of solidarity, a connection of souls seeking comfort. Every conversation, every shared laugh, was like a prayer rising to the sky. I understood now that the whispered prayers that had once frightened me were voices crying out for help, and by opening the door of the shelter, I had also opened a door to healing. However, I was constantly reminded of the perpetual presence of winter. The temperatures continued to plummet, and with that, the struggle to keep the shelter operational was relentless. The following days brought more people, some carrying the pain of losing their homes, while others sought solace in those dark moments. Each new face became a living memory of what I had witnessed in that dark room, and I found myself wondering how many more stories were yet to come. One night, as I looked out the window in search of stars, I thought about the figures that had left their mark on me. Were they somehow still present? The warmth of our interactions, the light of renewed hopes. Would any of this have been possible without the injured visitations of those souls? I closed my eyes for a moment, wishing that their silent intercessions could remain guarded among those who were struggling against the currents of life. The shelter began to regain its footing, and even during the coldest nights, the prayers did not cease. Through the small lit candles, in the flames of growing bonds of friendship and support, I realized there was a greater force at play. The voices that had once whispered guided me on a mission that transcended mere survival. They became a call for solidarity. When spring finally arrived, bringing with it promises of renewal, the shelter ceased to be merely a space for survival. It became a place where lessons of resilience were shared, where light and hope became as essential as food itself. What I began as mere volunteering solidified into my essence, a journey that shaped not only those around me, but also myself in ways I could never have imagined. The voices that now resonated were different from those at the beginning. The prayers that had once been whispered transformed into shouts of victory, celebrations of lives rebuilt. With that, I learned the true meaning of compassion and the importance of listening to the voices that often linger in the shadows. While the memory of those moments and those anguished pleas accompanied me, it was now a reminder that healing is a continuous cycle, a space where light and shadow coexist to shape who we become. In the end, one certainty took root in my heart: the importance of listening and being heard. The voices that were once shadows showed me that each prayer, each silent plea, revealed an emotional fabric intertwining us all. In that shelter, life experiences were warmed by the heat of empathy and solidarity. I realized that, in times of pain, it is within our human connections that we find the strength to carry on. With the arrival of spring, the shelter began to bloom not just physically, but emotionally. Numerous stories of resilience began to emerge, and many people who passed through her healing slowly starting to rebuild their lives. Some families reconnected, while others formed unexpected friendships, sharing memories of what they had lost and dreams of what they could still achieve. Each tale became a stone in the foundation of their new lives. Charitable events began to take shape. The shelter was no longer just a place for refuge. It became a meeting point for those who wanted to help and support one another. We organized fairs, events with performances, and people started bringing their talents to the space. A former teacher began holding reading classes, while another volunteer, an artist, offered painting workshops. Everyone wanted to contribute in some way, and the atmosphere transformed into a celebration of rebirth. I had volunteered to coordinate the activities, but the feeling of helping to bring something new into the lives of others became a vital part of my own healing journey. As we worked together, I realized that not only were people uniting in their pain, but also in their strength. The voices that once cried for help became a hymn to resilience, and the shelter evolved into a true support community. Reflecting on the months past, I could not help but feel my heart swell with gratitude. The darkness of those cold nights felt so distant, as if someone had left the door ajar for a new life. The figures that had visited me were no longer a haunting memory. Now, they were symbols of transformation. They showed me what is vital in moments of crisis: the importance of extending a hand and offering a listening ear, even when the words seemed too difficult to articulate. At the back of the shelter, where the echoes of whispers still seemed to resonate, I took a moment to appreciate everything that had unfolded. I looked at the walls, now adorned with images and messages of hope, testaments to the growth that had occurred there. The shelter had become a space where the voices of the past mingled with new stories, creating a place that fostered healing and transformation. With time and the strength of the community, we decided to document our stories. We began to write a collective book where each person could share their experiences, from the darkest moments to the brightest. It was a project that united all voices, and in the end, what had initially seemed like an exercise in despair became a celebration of life. The book not only immortalized our struggles, but materialized as a guide of hope for future generations. On the night of our book launch, the shelter was filled with people who had become an extension of my own family. Everyone was eager and proud, reflecting on what they had been through while inspiring courage in one another. Looking at the smiling faces, listening to the laughter and applause as we shared our stories was a cathartic experience. The deep connection formed among all of us was a testament to the power of community and faith in humanity. With each story read and empathy spreading through the air, I realized I had discovered something very valuable from all the pain that had initially surrounded me. The shelter was not simply a physical space. Through the words and experiences, it had healed not only others, but also me. It was not about saving, but allowing oneself to be shaped and becoming part of something that transcended individuality. As the night drew to a close, with laughter fading and the lights dimming, a thought lingered in my mind. What had begun as a whisper of pain had transformed into a shout of hope. I was able to see the beauty in our fragilities and the strength we find together in adversity. As I stepped away from the bustle of the event and reflected on what had transpired, I realized that every step of my journey was intertwined with the fate of others. The shelter had transformed into a sacred space where pain became the spark for renewal. What could have been merely a place of survival was now pulsating with life and hope. As days turned into weeks, my experience as a volunteer altered my understanding of compassion and helping others. I began to seek new ways to provide support outside the shelter. Community meetings were organized where we could share our challenges and successes. Listening to others' stories, I realized our struggles were more interconnected than we had imagined. The shelter had become a microcosm of life, filled with lessons that went beyond the cold and the need for shelter. The figures of the whispered prayers also became less frightening. Instead, they embodied the idea of a protective and inspiring force, a constant reminder that in darkness, the lights of hope shine much more brightly. Whenever someone new arrived at the shelter, I felt the need to remind everyone that, regardless of their personal stories, this was a shared journey. Laughter, tears, love, and challenges became intertwined in a rich tapestry in which everyone played a part. As time passed, spring turned into summer, and that community expanded, incorporating new voices and experiences. In the following months, in addition to support meetings, we decided to organize an annual event at the shelter, a festival that would celebrate the resilience and strength we found in one another. The event would not only raise funds, but also share our stories with a wider audience, creating a space where sad memories could be told and transformed into something beautiful. On the day of the festival, the park where the shelter was located overflowed with laughter, color, and music. I set up a booth where I shared the stories we had collected in the book, bringing those moments of pain and transformation to a larger audience. As I watched people come together, the spirit of the community rose again, and I realized that the joy emanating from that place was a healing force, not just for the volunteers, but also for all who had passed through. That day, we celebrated our journey together and expressed gratitude for each person who had found their way to us. As I walked through the park, comforted by new and old friendships, I remembered the whispers of prayers that had begun this entire journey. Those desperate pleas for help, which initially left me terrified, were now replaced by laughter and words of encouragement. The voices had not only found a home, but had become part of a harmonious choir pulsing with hope and love. As I wrapped up that memorable day, I looked up at the sky, now so blue and bright, and felt the weight that I had accepted as a volunteer. The shelter had not only changed the lives around me, but had shaped my own in ways I could never have foreseen. The lessons at the brink of the abyss had transformed into points of light, showing that as long as there are people who care, there will always be a way forward. In those moments of connection, I realized that what had once been pain had become the fabric that bound us all together. The shelter, that structure that had once opened its doors to welcome the needy, was now a symbol of collective strength, community, and compassion, reminding us that even in the darkest nights, the whispered prayers that rise in the air have the power to shape the future. As a result, life began to move toward healing, and the reality we built together transformed into a new narrative, a legacy bequeathed to future generations. I left the shelter that afternoon with a renewed sense of purpose. Each step I took was a recognition that the struggles would still exist, but also that the voices were never truly alone. We were together, blessed with the power of redemption and human love in every prayer we whispered, both against and in favor of the strength of life. The journey of healing was far from over, but I felt confident in the knowledge that we were moving forward as a community. We would continue to face the challenges that lay ahead, but now we did so with a collective spirit that thrived on understanding and support. The shelter had become more than just a refuge from the elements. It was a sanctuary for stories, emotions, and shared experiences. I took with me the lessons learned and the bonds forged in adversity. As I looked back at the shelter one last time, I saw not just a building, but a beacon of hope shining brightly against the cold backdrop of winter. Together, we had turned vulnerability into strength and sorrow into joy. The journey we had embarked upon would resonate in our hearts, reminding us that in every whispered prayer and shared moment of connection, we had found our way home. As the seasons changed, so did I. I embraced the beauty of life and the impermanence of our circumstances, knowing that we all carry pieces of each other with us, woven together by the threads of empathy, experience, and love. In every new encounter, I would carry the strength of that shelter with me, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It was a clear, cold morning when I decided to climb the mountain that many said was magical, known for its beauty and mystery. The legend of the Snow Guardian, a figure who protected visitors and was revered by the locals, had always intrigued me. As I hiked, the trail became narrower, so I kept my focus on the path ahead. But as I ascended, something began to change in the atmosphere. The trees, tall and imposing, seemed to twist more than was natural, as if they were creatures with a will of their own. Leaves of vibrant green began to detach from the branches, floating through the air despite the absence of any wind. The landscape that felt so welcoming on the way down now presented an oppression that weighed heavily on my shoulders. I felt as if I were being watched, and increasingly, the trail transformed into a foggy labyrinth where logic seemed to dissolve. I decided to stop and rest in a spot that resembled a small campsite. The mountain view was stunning, but an unsettling feeling prevented me from fully enjoying the moment. The walls of the forest seemed to close in, and moving shadows began to dance around me. I sensed something in the air, an invisible presence that made the environment tense. For a brief moment, I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing, trying to dispel the disturbing thoughts. But when I opened my eyes again, something made me freeze. In the distance between the trees, I saw a figure that should not be there. Wrapped in a dark cloak, the hood covered its face. A chill ran down my spine as I realized this figure remained still, watching me. The intimidation of its presence was palpable, and the urge to run surged within me. It was as if the voices of the forest, which had been low murmurs moments before, had transformed into a chorus of mocking laughter. The The voices around me began to intensify, forming an agonizing echo that seemed to whisper dark secrets. "You shouldn't be here," they seemed to croon, making the atmosphere even more oppressive. An inexplicable fear started to blossom within me, and the figure in its cloak released a low, deep laugh that reverberated through the trees. At the same time, the legend of the Guardian now morphed into a nightmare. The desire to flee became uncontrollable, but something held me back. It was as if an invisible spell was binding me to the spot. As the figure advanced slowly, its form appeared to shift, as if merging with the shadows surrounding us. Each of its steps made the ground tremble beneath my feet, and the trees seemed to lean slightly, as if bowing in respect to the Guardian who, according to the stories, protected the mountain, but now revealed itself in a form I had not anticipated. I could feel the cold intensifying, and the urge to scream or call for help dissipated, suffocated by an overwhelming pressure. It was as though I were at the center of a nightmare where logic meant nothing. The figure halted a few meters away from me, and its voices grew louder, echoing a message that resonated deep within. The Guardian does not allow the unprepared to ascend. I tried to lift my legs, but they felt heavy, as if the snow itself was holding me down. The figure raised its arms, revealing claws that glimmered under the pale sunlight filtering through the leaves. A wave of panic surged within me, realizing that the legend had a darker side I had never imagined. At the same time, the awareness that the voices, which had previously seemed threatening, could actually be a warning consumed me. Turn back now, echoed in my mind like a final admonition. Finally, a surge of adrenaline coursed through me, and I managed to break free from the invisible spell that held me. With desperate effort, I turned and began to run back down the trail. The sound of laughter resonated in the trees as the shadows seemed to follow me, trying to drag me back. The branches snapped in my wake, but I didn't stop to look back. My only thought was to escape that realm that felt as if it were claiming me. The terrain beneath my feet was uneven, and the snow clung to my boots as I ran, as if my life depended on it. The echo of those sinister laughs transformed into a cacophony of voices, surrounding me like a sea of despair. I felt the cold biting in my skin, but adrenaline pumped through my veins, propelling me forward. Every beat of my heart reverberated in my head, and I could hardly think about anything but escaping that terrifying presence. As I barreled down the trail, the scenery around me began to shift. The trees twisted and grew, forming a labyrinth, and I wondered if the mountain itself was trying to prevent me from finding the way out. The voices grew sharper and more anguished, as if the forest were reveling in my fear. "You do not belong here. Your presence is an offense," echoed in a chorus that left me even more desperate. In that moment, I realized I needed to find a way to escape, but the path I thought I knew was becoming increasingly strange. The oppressive weight on my back was the figure, relentless and pursuing me in the shadows of each tree. I glanced up at the sky. The clouds were so dark they seemed to be closing in, as if nature itself were orchestrating the chaos. Time felt like an illusion, and the sensation of being swallowed by darkness was palpable. After what felt like an eternity of running, I stumbled into a clearing, and as I did, a profound silence fell over the area. I stopped and looked around, trying to catch my breath, but a deep chill settled in the space. It felt as if the world had paused, and the voices seemed to echo from afar, whispering words only I could hear. A shiver ran down my spine, and an idea began to form in my mind. The Snow Guardian was not just a legend. It was an entity guarding a secret, and I had crossed a line that I should not have crossed. Gathering my strength, I looked back towards the trail where the whispers had originated. I felt hesitant, knowing I needed to turn back, but the sense that the mountain would not easily permit my departure was undeniable. The figure, still invisible, could be watching me, waiting for me to take a misstep. I needed to find a way to show that I was not a threat, that I was not there to disrespect the sanctity of the mountain. With this thought in mind, I recalled the legend. The guardian not only guided visitors, but also helped those who showed humility and respect. In an attempt to appease the presence, I closed my eyes and focused, murmuring an apology to the mountain, to the trees, and to the guardian. I opened my heart, acknowledging that there was more around me than I understood. I'm not here to cause harm. I only seek to pass through and learn, I whispered, almost like a prayer. In that moment, as those words left my lips, the pressure around me began to ease. The cold that surrounded me seemed to warm, and a new air filled the clearing. A gentle breeze swept through, and the voices that had once felt threatening transformed into reassuring murmurs. Opening my eyes, I saw a faint white mist forming, dancing as if it were a testament to a newly discovered understanding between me and the guardian. The figure in its dark cloak began to slowly reveal itself, no longer threatening, but majestic and imposing. The gaze that had once been disdainful now appeared deep and wise. "You have sought to understand." The voice resonated, echoing through the trees around me. "Not all who climb these mountains intend to harm, but it is the wisdom you carry that will be your greatest shield." I felt an immense relief at realizing that, even in the face of fear, understanding and respect could open doors. The guardian, now visible and commanding, was a figure that reflected not only strength but also compassion. With this revelation, a sense of gratitude flooded my chest. I understood that the mountain was not just a place of challenges, but also one of learning and growth. As I held the gaze of the guardian, I realized there was no need for further words. The connection I felt with this entity was profound, transcending the boundary between fear and acceptance. The whispers of the past faded as a new harmony emerged, and I knew I had entered a sacred space where lessons were imparted, not through punishment, but through guidance. In that moment of clarity, I felt empowered to move forward. The path ahead seemed illuminated, inviting me to continue my journey with newfound resolve. As I stepped away from the clearing, I turned one last time to the guardian, bowing my head in gratitude. The mountain, with all its secrets and shadows, had become a teacher, and I would carry its lessons with me, not just as a memory of fear, but as a beacon of hope and knowledge. With a heart full of determination and respect, I began my descent. I knew that the experience had changed me and that I would carry the spirit of the guardian with me, a reminder of the strength found in understanding and the beauty of facing one's fears. The mountain may have tested me, but it had also shown me the resilience of the human spirit and the power of connection, a journey that would not be merely physical, but also spiritual. I looked at the guardian, who now emitted a gentle light, like a beacon in the darkness. I understood that the path ahead was not just about climbing a mountain, but about a deeper quest for understanding and connection. He watched me with a gaze that seemed to penetrate my soul, and in his presence, I felt all the tension and fear I had felt earlier dissipate. "Every step you took on this mountain brought challenges and lessons," the guardian continued, his voice echoing around me like a gentle breeze. "Those who come need to understand that nature is not a force to be dominated, but a partner to be respected." Each word resonated in my mind, and the wisdom in his teachings made me reflect on how often we ignore the power and beauty that exist in our world. With a lighter heart, I began to perceive the beauty of the mountain around me. The sun was starting to set, bathing everything in golden light, and the trees began to sparkle as if draped in diamonds. For the first time on this journey, I felt part of something larger, part of the endless cycle of life, the dance between nature and humanity. The guardian was right. There was much to learn here. As I prepared to follow the path back down, a sense of peace filled my heart. The fear that had chased me had transformed into respect and reverence. I looked one last time at the guardian. "Thank you for showing me the truth and beauty in this mountain. I will return, and I promise to respect and protect this sacred place." He nodded, and for the first time, I felt the path open up before me. The descent down the mountain felt different. The sounds of the forest were no longer of darkness, but rather a symphony of life. The leaves danced in the wind, and the environment calmed, as if validating my respect for it. The whispers of the trees now felt like a compliment, a thank you for acknowledging what I had learned. When I finally reached the base of the mountain, the sunlight illuminated everything around me. I looked back and saw the imposing silhouette of the mountain, now bringing with it a feeling of protection instead of fear. The Guardian was there, an eternal presence, watching over those seeking refuge in its beauty and respect. I felt that I had not only climbed and faced challenges, but I had truly grown as a human. I decided to share my experience with others, no longer as a tale of terror, but as a testimony of transformation. Telling my story became a mission. What could have been an uncomfortable encounter was now transformed into an activity that inspired others to explore nature with respect and appreciation. The legend of the Snow Guardian would not only become a story, but an invitation for future generations to understand the mountain and what it represented. Months later, I returned to that same mountain, this time with friends who also wanted to explore and learn. As we climbed, I shared about the Guardian, the lessons, and the beauty of the transformative experience I had encountered. Each of us felt that connection, and together we made a promise to respect what nature offers and to become guardians in our own rights. Now, the Snow Guardian had become part of our collective story, a symbol of the bond we formed not only among ourselves, but also with the world around us. At the end of the journey, when I looked at the trees and the sky, I felt the mountain's voices rising again, but this time as a chorus of gratitude and respect. In that mountain, not only had a guardian revealed itself, but countless lessons about the essence of life and the beauty we can find when we respect the forces surrounding us. With every step I took, each of us had become a little more aware and, indeed, part of that eternal dance between man and nature. And in that process of discovery, I finally realized we all have a guardian within us, reminding us to protect and celebrate the world we inhabit. My heart raced as I stumbled back over the snow, each step feeling like a race against an unseen foe. The oppressive cold wrapped around me, but the fear pushing me forward felt possible to confront. The whispers and shadows lurked behind me, their presence palpable as I made my way back toward the safety of the cabin. I could hear the wind rising, carrying with it the echoes of those figures I had encountered, each scream piercing the howling air around me. When I finally reached the shelter door, I flung it open and dashed inside, slamming it shut behind me. The warmth of the cabin was a relief, but I was still trembling from the encounter. My fellow climbers looked up, concern etched on their faces as I gasped for breath. "What happened?" James asked, his eyes wide. I struggled to catch my breath, feeling the weight of what I had witnessed crush my chest. "There were figures," I stammered, trying to shake off the memory of those distorted faces. "They were dancing in the light. I thought I was seeing things, but they felt real, so real." The disbelief in their eyes told me they wanted to brush off my experience, but I was driven by a need to share what had occurred, to make them understand that it was not just my imagination. The atmosphere shifted as I recounted the details, my heart pounding more fiercely with every word. They weren't just shadows. They felt like they belonged to the mountain. It was as if they were waiting, watching. My voice trailed off as I recalled the urgency in the whispers, the warning that echoed in the depths of my mind. With each passing moment, the snowstorm outside raged on, the wind shrieking like a banshee, matching the turmoil in my heart. While we huddled together, I could feel the walls closing in, a reminder of how fragile our safety was amidst the might of nature. Then the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. The same feeling of being watched returned, this time not from outside, but from within the room itself. One by one, my friends exchanged glances, sensing the tension tightening around us. It was almost as if the mountain's presence had infiltrated our shelter, seeping through the walls like a malevolent spirit. My fears felt tangible, and I challenged myself to know that we were safe here, but the weight of the legends and whispers lingered heavily. James broke the silence. "We need to regroup. If there are any more storms, we have to be prepared. both physically and mentally. His words hung in the air, and soon we found ourselves discussing the legends we had heard before embarking on our journey. Tales of climbers who had gone missing or been claimed by the mountain. Each story threaded into the next, reinforcing the notion that we were intruders in a sacred space. In those moments of shared fear, I realized we could either let our terror tear us apart or bind us together. I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. We could honor the Guardian, acknowledging its presence by respecting the mountain's power rather than challenging it. With newfound resolve, I suggested we hold a moment of silence, an offering to those lost in the white abyss outside. As we stood in silence, I felt a shift. The air felt different, charged with a collective understanding of the risks we had taken and the respect we owed to the mountain. In that shared moment, the whispers seemed to quiet, a testament to our determination to honor not only ourselves, but those who had come before us. When we finally broke the silence, there was a sense of unity in our words and intentions. We vowed to continue our trek with humility and respect, not just for our safety, but also as a tribute to the unseen forces that shaped this world. We would carry the spirit of the Guardian with us, acknowledging its role as both protector and reminder of our own vulnerabilities. With that sense of camaraderie, I felt lighter. It was as if the weight of our fears began to dissipate with every shared story and promise made. We were a team, bound together not just by the mountain challenge, but by our collective strength and resilience. And though the storm howled outside, we stood together, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing full well that in unity, we could confront the shadows and emerge into the light. The distorted visions grew more intense, as if trying to grasp me with invisible hands while I ran. Each step in the snow was a challenge, and the sensation of being immediately followed by something from my own nightmares made me accelerate even more. The clearing soon faded behind me, but the energy emanating from that strange place seemed to pull me back at every moment. The deafening screams echoed in my mind, but I was consumed by a primitive urge to survive. My only priority was to reach the safety of the cabin. A part of me hesitated. It was more than the fear of the unknown. It was the realization that I had crossed a threshold, that those figures were not mere shadows, but trapped souls seeking liberation who now saw me as an intruder. Finally, this time, as I saw the silhouette of the cabin drawing closer, I took a deep breath, my heart pounding as if it wanted to escape my chest. The biting cold and the snowstorm felt less threatening now. As if by returning, I had broken a spell. I reached the door, but before opening it, I turned back once more toward the clearing, hoping not to see those empty eyes watching me. What had happened on that mountain was something I could never ignore. As soon as I entered, the internal lights of the cabin seemed to shine with greater intensity. The faces of my companions were uneasy, but I could barely explain what I had seen. I was in shock, and the reality of what had happened weighed on me like an endless snowstorm. Not paying much attention to their thoughts, I collapsed onto the floor, trying to process it all. The warmth of the fireplace was comforting, but the feeling of cold still lingered like a second skin. Somehow, the cozy shelter didn't erase the image of the clearing and the distorted figures from my mind. With every crackle of the fire, the echoes of sinister laughter returned, reminding me of what I had left behind. That night, the voices in the storm followed me into nightmares. I dreamed of those figures in an endless cycle of waterfalls of light and shadows, dancing in a space between worlds. The snowstorm became a haunting spectacle, and the trapped souls cried out from the darkness. As dawn broke, the storm had finally passed, but the weight of the experience still clung to me. By the fireplace, a steaming cup of coffee comforted me as I gazed out at the mountain through the window. But there was something more. A heavy mist lingered over the clearing, as if the shadows were still there, waiting. The desire to return to that light grew stronger, but I knew I could not allow myself to do so. After a few days, I decided to share my experience with my expedition group. I was met with skeptical looks, but I didn't care. What I had seen and felt was real to me. I spoke of the Snow Guardian as a reminder that even in our pursuit of adventure, there exists a subtle world full of stories surrounding us, and that we must learn to respect it. The connection I had made with that place was intertwined with an understanding of honor and vulnerability. I knew I could never view that mountain in the same way again. The story of the Guardian was something more than a folk tale. It was a warning and a summons for those who had the courage to climb. And as time passed, I would not become an unprepared visitor again, but a guardian of that mountain in my own way. By realizing that light could hide darkness, I promised to respect what it meant to be a traveler, even amid the storm. As we gathered our things to continue our journey, I cast one last look at the clearing in the distance. The sight of that light was no longer a symbol of attraction, but a reminder of what the mountain demanded from those who dared to visit it. Thus, as we left the shelter and headed back towards civilization, a new perception of the world and the mountains settled in my heart. Even the darkest experiences, when faced head-on, could bring meaning. With a deep respect for nature and what it might conceal, I left the mountain knowing that in every journey of life, light and darkness coexist, intertwined in an eternal dance. Each mountain has its stories, its legends rooted in earth and silence. What I experienced was a price to pay for curiosity, but also an open door to wisdom that few dare to explore. On the way back, I reflected on everything I saw, paying attention to every shadow dancing in the sunlight. Nature now seemed more alive, more aware. The trees were not just vegetation. They were witnesses to what had transpired, confident in their roles as guardians of the land. Somehow, I felt that I too belonged to that majesty and bore the responsibility that descended upon the steps I left behind. After returning safely, I carried with me the lessons that the expedition had taught me. I spent hours observing the landscape around me, knowing that what I saw was only a fraction of what existed beneath the surface. Even in my daily life, I realized there was a parallel between mountains and human experiences. What is visible does not always tell the whole story, and what may appear bright sometimes hides dark depths. I invited friends to join me on future hikes, not just to explore nature, but to make it a journey of shared discovery. Talking about the Mountain Guardian became a fundamental part of our conversations, and what had once been a terrifying legend began to evolve into a symbol of protection and respect. We all wanted to learn what was necessary not just to climb, but to honor those who had walked before us. In the following winter, when the first snowstorm blanketed the familiar landscape, I organized a special expedition. It would be a pilgrimage to share what I had learned, not only for the adventure of climbing, but as a way to give back to the mountain. A group of friends and new acquaintances gathered, all excited and curious. During the trip, I explained about the light and darkness, about listening to the voices of the past, and always respecting what is not visible. Upon reaching the small cabin that would shelter us, a sense of calm and connection settled in. As we waited for the storm to pass, I shared the story of the disturbing vision I had experienced, not as a warning, but as an invitation to seek the truth in the shadows. Around the fireplace, with the light dancing on the walls, hearts opened wider, and conversations flowed effortlessly. That night, after spending hours exchanging stories and reflections, something incredible happened. The voices that had once been dark whispers gained new life. Each person there expressed their own experience with nature and what it had taught them. Stories of overcoming, challenges faced in adversity, and respect for the beauty of life filled the air with vibrant energy. I realized that those voices were not just echoes of the past, but part of a new narrative that continued to unfold as we walked together. The next morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, we decided to take a walk toward the clearing where I had seen the light. The path felt more familiar now, and the awareness of what the mountain might conceal made me more respectful, cautious with every step I took. The cold was no longer a barrier, but an invitation to contemplation. The light that had haunted my memory transformed into hope, a healthy curiosity for the truth. Upon reaching the clearing, The snow was still covered by a fresh mantle, and surprisingly, tranquility enveloped the space. As I stood in silence, I could feel the presence of the guardian, an echo in every tree, a greeting in the sound of the wind. It was no longer a moment of fear, but of deep respect. We knew now that in the depths of nature, we all have a place. With a collective gesture, we made a promise to protect the mountain and share its legacy. In our future lives, this journey through the challenges of the mountain became a metaphor for real life. As nature continues to grow and change, so does the human journey. The voices that had once haunted us transformed into symbols of connection, understanding, and above all, respect. The light in the storm was not just an occurrence. It was a transformative lesson about the relationship between life and nature. Each of us now became a guardian of the stories we carried, aware that the courage to face the unknown came with the potential to emerge stronger. As we left the clearing, something inside me lit up. From what I had learned, I realized that every mountain, every snowstorm in life can teach us to honor not just the challenges, but the beauty they can present. In the months that followed, I shared these experiences with other groups of adventurers, always emphasizing the importance of listening to the voices of nature and remembering the snow guardian. I was invited to give talks at mountaineering associations, where my story about light and darkness sparked interest and reflection. People began sharing their own experiences of triumph and learning in the mountains, creating a dialogue that extended beyond the walls of an auditorium. With each new group I met, the legend of the Guardian grew stronger. The stories we told intertwined and took deeper root. What had once been just a local tale transformed into a symbol of protection and spiritual wisdom, anchoring future generations. Younger adventurers began to yearn to climb those mountains, eager for knowledge, but now with a new understanding. For every height they ascended, it was crucial to carry with them respect for the land and its history. We decided to organize a special expedition that would bring together all those touched by the legend. The idea was not only to climb, but also to perform a ritual in honor of the Guardian. On the day of the ascent, a diverse group of friends and mountain enthusiasts gathered, and the collective energy was vibrant. With every step, we felt a calling to remember that we were part of something greater, intertwined with the challenges and victories of our predecessors. As we reached the summit, a feeling of reverence settled among us. It seemed that this was the moment the mountain had been waiting for. With a collective gesture, we all held hands and formed a circle, sharing stories and words of gratitude around what those mountains meant to each of us. My voice intertwined with those of others as we spoke about our experiences, each word a brick in the foundation of what the Guardian represented: protection, learning, and respect for life. In that moment of communion, the fresh breeze brought with it a sense of welcome. I looked up at the sky, where the clouds danced with the sunlight. A sense of peace permeated our group, and we did not bid farewell. Instead, we offered a greeting. The mountain had become a symbol not only of struggle, but of the unity among people seeking to connect with something deeper, a sacred space we could all share. The descent was made with a new sense of purpose. Each step recorded the journey we had lived, and the awareness that we were now all guardians of the mountains and their legends brought us even closer together. We emerged not just as individuals, but as a community that carried a legacy and the responsibility to pass on the knowledge and respect we had cultivated. Upon returning home, those mountains no longer seemed distant, but rather a part of me. I wanted to go back, not as a casual visitor, but as someone who understood the significance of being present. The lessons of light and darkness had become a vital part of my life, a certainty that even in storms, there is beauty and learning waiting to be discovered. Now, as I plan new expeditions, I always ponder the voices that surround us. When I look at those mountains, I see not just challenges, but a sacred space filled with stories waiting to be revealed. The story of the Snow Guardian became a platform through which I learned the importance of honoring our environment, respecting those who came before us, and understanding that we all carry within us a small guardian. The will to learn, grow, and connect with the world around us. And so, with a lighter heart and a renewed consciousness, I move forward. The light of experience is now a constant on my journey, illuminating the path ahead. I do not carry merely the memory of a guardian, but the certainty that for every storm we face, there is a renewing force waiting at the end. Every new hike I undertake in the mountains is an act of homage, not just to the snow guardian, but to all those who struggle and learn from nature. This deep understanding of our place in the world has become the compass guiding every decision I make, no matter how challenging the journey may be. Subsequent expeditions provided new experiences, each replete with unique lessons. I learned to respect the force of nature and the fragility of human life. Every trek in the mountains became a ritual, a way to reconnect and remind myself of the responsibility we have towards the world around us. I brought friends and new acquaintances with me, sharing not only the trails, but also the philosophy of life that developed from a legend. Once, while exploring a new mountain, I organized a small ceremony in honor of the guardian. With a group of friends who shared this passion for nature, we gathered in a quiet spot surrounded by trees. Together, we not only shared stories, but also offered thanks to the mountain, promising to protect what it offers. During that moment, I felt the echo of voices in my heart, reminding me that we were the new guardians, watching over and learning from nature. As the years went by, my connection with the mountain grew stronger. With each new journey, that sense of belonging deepened. A profound bond formed not only between me and the mountains, but also among all those who walked with me. The rediscovery of nature became a movement, and little by little, I created a group dedicated to mountain conservation. Together, we organized cleanups along the trails, promoting awareness of the importance of protecting these sacred spaces. It was a joy to see them understand that each step taken on the trails was a chance to care for what we have, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. The legend of the Guardian became a symbol of our mission, and each time I climbed a mountain, I was reminded of the importance of respecting the darker side, the one that, while foreboding, teaches us the significance of light. During one of our expeditions, we encountered a group of teenagers who had never had the opportunity to climb. With enthusiasm, we offered them the chance to venture up the mountain. That opportunity became a journey not just of climbing, but a lesson in living in harmony with nature. Seeing the wonder in their faces as they stood on the summit for the first time made me realize how the light was spreading and how the legacy of the Guardian was being perpetuated. As more people joined our conservation group, the impact we had on the community grew. Organizing events and camps became part of our routine, and the identity of mountain guardians became increasingly strong. Respect for nature grew alongside the connections we forged with one another, uniting a diversity of experiences into a common language, the language of nature. Heading to the mountain was not just an activity, it was a way of life. By confessing to others about my own struggles and what I had witnessed, I discovered that many had their tales of terror and beauty to share. This collection of experiences transformed into a project where we recorded and shared these stories on our website. While some of the mountains remained shrouded in mystery, others have been explored and have become symbols of triumph and hope. We had learned to turn our pain into fuel for wisdom, passing this profound truth onward. As life continued, the stories of each step taken in the mountains intertwined, forming a rich and vibrant tapestry of learning and respect. With every adventure, the message of the Guardian resonated in my heart. The path to the light may be winding, but it is in adversity that we find true strength. Today, as I look at the mountains before me, I feel that I am not only ready to face new challenges, but also deeply connected to everything around me. Thus, I move forward, not just as an explorer, but as a guardian in a world filled with beauty, mysteries, and the lessons that always await us.